What's up, developers? This is chapter 5 of my Cloudflare and Hono course, and in this chapter we'll be setting up ESLint in order to provide us warnings when we have potential issues with our code. So what we need to do is set up ESLint to work with both Astro files and with TypeScript files. So here on the Astro documentation, they have this little section which says ESLint is a popular linter, and for Astro support there is a community maintained plugin. So I already have a link to that plugin right here. This just takes us right over here to the GitHub repo where we can read through the documentation. So if I scroll on down, it's going to walk us through what we need to do in order to get this extension up and running. So let's go ahead and install all of these packages that we need. So first, we're going to install ESLint and the ESLint plugin Astro. So I can copy this, jump over to VS Code, and go ahead and plug it in here. Now I'm using Bun, so I need to switch this out for Bun install. All right, looks good. And then we can jump back over to the documentation, and it says if you want to use TypeScript in Astro components, then we need to install the TypeScript parser as well. So we're going to go ahead and grab that because I am using TypeScript, and then switch out npm for bun again. All right, that looks good. Now jump back over to the documentation. Now that everything is installed, we can go ahead and scroll down through the documentation. And the next thing that we're going to want to do is create an ESLint config file. So here it gives us two options. There's this ESLint config.js and ESLint config.cjs. This one is the old school style of doing things. You can see it uses the require, whereas the import is the modern, more up-to-date way of doing things. So this is what we're going to want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy this code and then create an ESLint config.js file. And what we want to do is add that into our root directory. And then I can paste this in here like that. And I can clean up some of these comments. And then if we jump back over to the documentation, there is a section here that shows us how we can actually run our linter. So if I keep scrolling, I'll find it. There we are. So right here, this line of code, we can add this command into our package.json and run that. So if I come over here to package.json, we can add this here in the script section. And here, let me say the name of the script will be lint, and then paste that. And we're getting an issue because this is double quotes and double quotes. So we need to switch that. Okay, it's being feisty with me. Single quote and then double quote. There we go. Okay, so now what we can do is we can go ahead and run this linting script and see if it works. Actually, before I do that, so I don't have many JavaScript files here. What I want is to test out TypeScript and TSX and Astro, of course. So those are the files we really want to lint, and we want to do that inside of our source directory because stuff in public and node modules and whatnot, that doesn't need to be linted. So if I go bun run lint, we can see it ran and there were no issues. Now this is a little deceptive because it's not actually testing out our TypeScript files yet. So if we jump back over to here, we could see that our ESLint plugin Astro config recommended, that's all set up, and so it's testing the Astro files like our hello.astro, but there's nothing in here about TypeScript. So if we jump back over to the documentation, I have the section pulled up here. So it says if you're writing client-side TypeScript and then you want to use the TypeScript parser here. So okay, that's what we want to do. We want to add in So this here, the module.exports, that's the old school formatting. So we'll need to merge this into our new format. But ultimately, here we can add files and the processor of Astro / client side TS. So this is their main callout. We want to use this. And then that'll be testing out our TypeScript files. So let's jump. Let's copy this little section here and then jump back over to VS Code. And then here inside of the rules, paste that. Clean up some of those comments here. And clean that up. Okay, and then in here with the files, we can add our TypeScript files. So let's do star.ts. So that's going to check for our TypeScript. And then we also want to check for TSX. So that's our TypeScript expression files. That's the front end TypeScript, really. And now that we have that, it should be testing out both our Astro and our TypeScript files. So if we run our plugin again, run lint, we can see it ran without any issues. Now, this looks good, but I'm the type of guy who likes to check his work. So I see this thing runs, but I want to know it's actually truly working. So let's go ahead and test it. Let's create an error, a linting error, and then have this thing actually show us that there's a failure, that there's an error, and make sure that it's truly working. So if we jump back over to the documentation here, and I scroll all the way down, here we can see the possible errors. Okay, so it's got all of these errors and security vulnerabilities that it's going to warn us about, which that's the benefit of this thing. It's going to give us these warnings and tell us that there's some issue with our code. So if we take a look at just this first one, missing client only directive value, and I open this up, and it says the client only directive is missing the corresponding component framework value. Okay. And further reading, let's go to the Astro documentation to understand this a little bit better. So client only, and this is the example. So it should show client only React if it's a React component, or Preact if it's a Preact component. So let's go ahead and add a React component, just a dummy one, to our code to make sure that we get this warning. That way we can test it out. So I haven't actually installed React in this project yet. So in order to do that, we can do bunx astro add React. And this is a little Astro script they put together for us for convenience. And it's going to install all these different React items that we need. It's updating our Astro config to import React and then adding the React integration here. So we can click Y for continue. And then it's adding to our TS config JSX compiler. Cool. All right, so it looks like it's all done with that. And now we can add a React component. So let's just make a dummy component, hi.tsx. And just say export const hi, and this will just return a div or something. So return a div, of hi. Okay. And then if we jump over to our index.astro and we import that file now, import hi. And here we say client only. Okay. So now we have this in here, and if I run my linting script, I would expect to see an error. There we go. So here we can see the error client only directive is missing a value. So that's what we wanted. Now we know that our linter is working. Okay, so we can see that the linter is working, but I'm not getting a warning here from VS Code. I would expect it to tell me like, hey, there's a linting error right here. So there is something that we can do in order to get VS Code to work with this. So if we go back over to the documentation, here I have it pulled up. So VS Code. So what we need to do is create a settings.json inside of the .vs Code file and paste this in here. And then that will get VS Code to work with the linter. So come over to .vs Code, add settings.json, then paste this in here, and then we can remove all of these comments. And if we come back over to our index file, now we have an error. So if I hover over this, it says client only directive is missing a value. And that's the error we were expecting. And then there's our little ESLint label. So perfect. Everything is now working with our linter, and this is going to be a great developer experience. And another thing I want to do quick is come down to the .getignore file. So in a previous chapter, I'd actually added the VS Code folder to the getignore because I've worked on teams where some people don't use VS Code and they get annoyed when there's a VS Code directory. So, but I realized this is a course and I'm teaching you all, so I should just push this up to GitHub where you can all see it. And that makes a lot more sense. Then this is just junk code that we can delete. That was just for testing purposes. I can delete the hi.tsx and remove that. And then we can take a look at our changes. So I'm going to add that VS Code folder back in. Then React was added to our config, and some dependencies that we installed are linting config, our package.json. We added in our linting script, and this was auto updated when React was installed. And then these are the files from the .vs Code folder directory. So we can push this up, added linting, and now that is in sync with our Git repository on GitHub. So that covers it for this chapter. All of our front-end tooling dependencies are set up. So in the next chapter, we can start building out some of the front-end code and start building the design of the website. Happy coding and Godspeed.